first came up with the idea of Skyline, it was very much based on our available materials. Greg had just recently moved into a new condo in Marina del Rey overlooking the whole city. Kind of had this idea in our head that it would be an amazing location to watch the world in.
The first film had very much a Cinderella story. I mean, we basically got all the financing secured on a 2-page pitch document. The entire shooting budget was under $1 million, which is very, very small budget for a 50-day shoot for a feature film, especially one with as many visual effects as it had and a lot of action sequences. We developed the movie in a box because a lot of it takes place inside the one condo. On the sequel, we wanted to open it up a lot. We wanted to be able to travel around the globe. We wanted to be able to get outside and combat aliens out in the city streets and the subway tunnels, anything but staying trapped inside a box. So that's what we really tried to avoid for the second movie.
The seed of the treatment was always that we would start in LA, then go up into the ship and kind of land someplace else. And it just kind of became more of a challenge of how do I do something different? How do I put it in a different scenery, and how do I make it more personal and specific?
When I read this script, okay, this is a lot of work in this, but it touched on a lot of things that I like photographically. I'm a big sci-fi nerd.
It always locked on to the idea of a father bailing his son out of jail the night of the invasion. It's set at the same time as the first film, but of course goes far beyond it, and I felt like this was a great way to ground the story and explore the themes of fatherhood. The character of Mark Corley was based on my best friend growing up, Matthew Santoro's father, Charles Santoro, from the Quincy Police Department in Massachusetts, who was a very strict, authoritarian figure, but had a heart of gold.
I was really keen on what was going to be happening in the story and the characters, and it seemed like there was a lot more attention to characterization on this one.
I first really noticed Frank Grillo in Warrior, I believe in 2011. I thought he kind of stole every scene in that movie, and he had a real authenticity, which I think is kind of the word that keeps coming up when people talk about Frank.
Literally his first day of shooting was a huge action fight sequence in 16 inches of water and mud in a rice paddy. That was basically that set the tone for the way this shoot was gonna go. It's like, it's gonna be physically demanding, grueling, very tough conditions, and there was no warm-up. It just right away, hit the ground running and fists were flying.
I spent a lot of time with him. Fighting with him is great. He's a true professional when it comes to, he takes his fighting seriously, actually. He's a really good boxer and trains a lot, works very hard.
When I started writing the script, I immediately thought Frank as the lead. It was a big coup to get him involved, and it was a big learning experience for me. We immediately started Skyping and talking about the character and talking about the script and reworking a lot of the stuff, especially in the first act, to really lock into who this guy was and create the character of Mark.
They were excited that they had a possible lead on Eco and Yan Yan.
I was just a massive fan of The Raid and The Raid 2. To me, it just seemed, too good to be true. I didn't even think it was a realm of possibility.
Once they got on board, it flipped the whole back end of the movie.
The next thing you know, Eco and Yayan were on a plane to go scout with us, and I kind of showed them what the general beats of the fight were in my mind, and then they just took their shoes off in the middle of the muddy rice paddies and started fighting each other, pretty much full speed, and then turned and looked at me and said, what do you think? And it was just, it's the best. It was crazy to me that I even got to have an opinion on what they were doing.
There was no selling punches with the way that they were doing it. They hit each other, but they would know how to hit just grazing each other, a little bit of an impact, but the other guy who was getting hit could feel that and react and sell the punch even more believably. The believability factor of doing that, it just brought a whole nother level of realism that we were trying to do.
It was actually very easy fighting them because they're so good at what they do. I was in the alien suit fighting them, and those two were just, they just dance around you and stabbing you and doing all this stuff, it's barely touching you. So it's very easy because they made the job really, really fun and great.
For the part of Audrey, we cast Bojana Novakovic, who ended up being just not only a great actress, but a really great ally and resource for me. She's very smart, very, very funny. She's a great on-set comedian, kept everything loose, and was just had an amazing rapport with our young actress, Elena, who played the little girl Rose, and their bond was special, and it made that whole kind of very crazy conceit grounded and gave a nice sort of a maternal energy to that part of the movie. Jonny. He's got a very natural presence on camera. He's got a great physicality for a young actor. Now, I learned a lot just by working with him. He could make, a moment that didn't exist come to life, or just sit back and listen and play it off Frank. As a director, two of my favorite scenes were just their two scenes together with, without any visual effects or without any aliens or action going on, just kind of like father and son, hashing out the things that need to be said. For the role of Harper, we wanted to kind of tweak convention a little bit. We always kind of made fun of having an expert scientist, and so if we were going to do that, I wanted him to be a little bit off. He's inspired by Dennis Hopper's character in Apocalypse Now. He used to work for the CDC. He's a chemist, but he's a bit of a burnout, and he's working in a drug running operation in the Golden Triangle. He knew Frank from Winter Soldier and other things. Their first meeting in the catacombs was a complete improvisation by Callan. On the last take and the last setup, he just walked over to Frank and introduced himself, and they had that little exchange, which is now in the movie. Because I didn't write it, it's easily the best written part of the whole thing.
So in terms of locations, we knew we wanted to have part of the story take place in Southeast Asia. As we started scouting, doing our research, Indonesia definitely sort of found its way to the top of the list. We had these beautiful temples in Prambanan that Liam wanted to shoot at, that we were able to get access to. They provided incredible production value. It just gives the movie a look that you couldn't quite achieve if you were shooting it in Southern California.
We decided, okay, Prambanan would be like pre-battle, and then as the battle happens, where there's more rubble and more of these things, structures all crumbled and falling apart, would be the aftermath of this, and we could kind of tie these two together into one location. Once we got the suits, it was like a eureka moment for us, because okay, we got a movie here now, we got a creature feature here. These things were amazing. Alan and his team just really delivered on a budget.
So Liam and I were talking about the first film. There's a lot of CGI creatures. So I asked him, why do you want to get away from that? Because it seemed like it was working pretty well.
The first Skyline was about flexing the CG capabilities of hydraulics. There was a lot of that put into the thought of the design, is that the design of the drone cannot be done practically. It is hovering on tentacles. It is a CG creature, and so if you're going to use CG, don't use CG for something that could still be practical. Use it for what it's good at. Use it for what it can do uniquely. That was also put into the design of the original pilot that Jared became at the end of the first movie. He had a real thin limbs and kind of odd proportions, and it was, like the movie itself, it was more of a horror look. His eyes were very bug-like and hard to emote. And so while it was a very cool and unique design, I just felt like it wasn't going to be practical for what we needed in this movie.
When you bring together a practical and CGI, you kind of get the best result, because you can start with something real that people can interact with, and then you can enhance it, and you kind of get the best of both worlds.
I wanted to go in a little bit more of a heroic direction. I wanted it to bring him into a little bit more of a predator and have the bottom eyes be very big, almost like Disney-like when they need to be. And so that's where we kind of came with this look at the pupils, that they could get really big and wide when he's open and when he's trying to connect with someone, or they can get really narrow when they're angry. We had to introduce a real villain and kind of have someone new to this story, something we hadn't seen before. I came up with this idea of the shepherd, is that if our brains are being put into these pilots, what's the original one? What's the real alien? What's the shepherd of this mindless flock?
So to actually physically make this, the first thing you need is a body form of the actor that's gonna wear the suit. Create a clay sculpture on top of that body form of the character. What we do is we print out life-size versions of the design that we can stand next to the sculpture just so we can check all the detail and textures. Most of the body is foam latex, which is like 100-year-old technology that works really well. It's very flexible, very forgiving, easy to repair, stretchy, light, stinky. When Liam and I started talking about these creatures, one of the things he asked me was, can we get a 7-foot-tall actor? A parallel conversation we were having was how to get away from the look of a man in a suit. There are commercially available jumping stilts that add about a foot to your height and give you a lot of bounce. It'll give him a interesting new movement because he's gonna spring with every step, you know, which gives him a very alien sort of gait.
You know, it took a little bit of getting used to. You know, there are 4-foot extensions on your legs. You know, and you're doing choreographed fights with, you know, very difficult moves.
There is a shot in the movie where the creature literally throws Iko through a wall, and Iko is not the tallest guy in the world, but when the creature steps through the wall, the scale difference between the two performers was actually kind of like jaw-dropping to me as I was operating, like, Jesus, that thing is fucking, and when you see it on the screen, it is so much bigger than Iko, you're like, how the fuck is this guy gonna even battle this thing? And that's the feeling you wanna have by having something on set.
Whenever you are tracking CG parts onto a live action character, it creates quite a lot of challenges. You have to match all the movements and make sure it doesn't look like things are sliding around.
Our main animator, kind of the head of the team under Joel Sevilla, is Alex Young, who brought to life the Alpha Tanker, which is the Shepherd's vehicle. You know, the kind of the big new badass bad guy.
The Alpha Tanker in the movie is the superhero version of the tanker in Skyline. It was basically, you know, figuring out how he would move and be such a big creature, but be agile, and that was a delicate balance.
Just to give people sort of a sense, the first movie had 1,000 visual effect shots in it. The second movie has almost 1,500.
It's really a testament to the group of people that Greg and Callan have put together at Hydraulics to help us, you know, realize this kind of insane vision.
I think Liam did a great job working with the actors, where when they're just surrounded in a world of green screen, and they don't necessarily always have something to play off of, puts more pressure on Liam to make sure that we're catching all the moments we need and all the beats.
From the compositing standpoint, Greg Haas has done a lot of amazing work. When he kind of first showed me the cockpit shot of the Trent pilot with all this red webbed energy in his eyes and his brain glowing, you know, that wasn't anything that I'd even asked for. It was far beyond, you know, my expectations. Nathan Whitehead was recommended to me by Matthew Chouse, our producer, and also editor Banner Gwynn, who both, you know, spoke incredibly highly of him. And we had actually already been temping some of the early cuts to some of his work.
You know, any project I like to try to just immerse myself in the story as much as possible. And an alien movie, and a movie that covers, you know, the Earth as well as all these alien ships and alien creatures. It was just such a huge world to try to come up with a sound for, to try to come up with an identity for. There aren't a lot of opportunities where you get to try to go as big as we go in Beyond Skyline.
Because we had such 3 distinct environments of Los Angeles, the Mothership, and Asia, instead of you know, making it an LA cop movie and then an aliens movie and then all of a sudden a martial arts movie, I wanted to have something that was more unifying.
In terms of shaping the score, you know, there's a lot of listening to sounds, there's a lot of kind of throwing music against the screen, so to speak, and just seeing what feels good. I, you know, worked on designing a lot of sounds. I like to record weird stuff, real world sounds, and process them, mangle them. And there's one sound that ended up playing a big part in the Alien, the Alien siren sound that was an elk. I don't know if I've told anybody this before. The sound an elk makes is called a bugle, an elk bugle. You're hiking through, you know, the forest and you hear this sound and it's eerie and it's coming from this huge animal. And there was something that was creepy about it, and there was something that was also sort of emotional. Anything that has, you know, that's a vocal component of people or of animals or anything like that, I think that emotion comes through. So I got a bunch of those recordings and processed them, and you know, that became a lot of the kind of higher pitched alien siren sounds in the movie, and I think it had this otherworldly feel to it.
I would, go over to his studio, listen to what he came up with, and kind of dream up ideas and all the different crazy sounds he would put together into the music, and kind of keep exploring sonically. And those ideas would then sometimes even push the edit into different directions. And so it was a really gratifying collaboration across the board.
My favorite moment's the Black Pit, when the Mark character, Frank Grillo's character, just wakes up on the ship. He's a little disoriented, and it's kind of a creepy moment. It's pretty dark, it's very atmospheric, and then all hell breaks loose. And people just start getting yanked up in the air and having their brains ripped out.
Very difficult to just to move around in there and to get act, and then, everybody's slimy and slippery, and everybody's going everywhere, trying to hit their marks, and, I got the wires pulling people out and flying around, slime everywhere. At the end of the day, I had so much gunk all over me, everybody. I wasn't even in it. And I had it all over me.
We hose it down with all this black methylcellulose gunk that we would have guys come in, like the fire department, just hose down 30 extras from Batam, poor unsuspecting souls, didn't know what they were getting into, of 8 hours of being doused. This is an alien ship. Let's make this as interactive and almost alive as possible. I wanted to have the sets not only be lit, but to evolve and to modulate and to change. So there was an idea of like different color motifs in the different set environments, but also that the sets themselves would almost be alive, like the lighting would be breathing. So you would have this ominous kind of foreboding presence, even in the interiors as they're going through. It would be breathing. There was a throb to the alien environments that would evolve both in terms of intensity, but also in color.
Callan and I have probably known Liam for at least 10 years now. He started off writing music video treatments for us. Now finally graduated, stepped away from the keyboard and behind the camera.
It's been a really cool experience to come from, that like protege role into then making something together and directing my first film. I want to thank everyone from the cast to our amazing crews, visual effects, Los Angeles, Toronto, Louisiana, Vancouver, and a special shout out to the people of Indonesia for really treating us all like family, working their hearts out, and I can't wait to share Beyond Skyline with you all.
Okay, stay with me as I have some cool behind-the-scenes trivia. Stop motion has featured prominently in famous science fiction films. 2 of the RoboCop movies feature the stop motion technique at work, and the finale of the first Terminator film was done with stop motion. Now, do you like my shirt? You can get one for yourself in the shop under this video, and remember to click here below to subscribe for more great content.